Well, greetings, everybody. I'm very happy to have Jim Ferguson on my channel. I'm usually on his, but I've got him to come on mine this time because he is. I've devoted most of my time to sort of technical economics and so on, geopolitical strategy and all that kind of thing, which is fine as far as it goes. But I'm a bit out of touch these days with party politics, and I know Jim has a very keen eye on what's going on. And a lot of people have been emailing me, and I know they've been emailing Jim as well, saying, what is going on? I don't really fully understand what's going on. So I'm going to let Jim give us his take on it. And I'll just shoot in if I think he can add a bit of value, clearing any extra points up. So, uh, Jim, we're living in interesting times. There's no really formal opposition. They sit on the benches, but they'll be gone by the next election, almost certainly, one would imagine. And there isn't really, at the moment, anybody to take over, because to take over, you're going to need a shadow front bench, to fight the election. What are you going to do? Who's going to be the Minister for Defence? Who's going to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer? So on and so forth. Answers there come none. Answers come there none. I watched Rupert Lowe at Restore, and he certainly makes a lot of common sense. But I mean, he's microscopic in the big picture, and he may get bigger. But there's talk about Burnham having an earlier election, and it seems to me that there's no one else really in town. And you and I will both know from the old days, and the UKIP days, going back many a moon, that if you, in a general election, don't go to the country with a team in a general election who are going to take place, you won't win. And the UKIP in 2014 got something like 4.5, 5 million votes, which was enormously satisfactory in the European election, and then turned up with no shadow, no shadow cabinet, no nothing at all in 2015. Of course, didn't get any seats, which I told Andrew Neil at the time on his show, and I told I told Nigel Farage in private that that's exactly what would happen. And we seem to be right back in the same place. But anyway, over to you, Jim. Give us your take on it all.
Well, first of all, it's fantastic to be on your show, Godfrey. I've always held you in high regard because you understand the political process very well. You're a very successful member of the European Parliament, and you've done a lot of things in your life. And that's why I love having you on for these discussions. But it's a great honor for me to be on your show. So here's what it seems to be happening at the moment. There is an appetite within the United Kingdom among the British patriots for change. They don't want to see a socialist government, whether it's led by Keir Starmer or anybody else like Andy Burnham. And I think there is a real danger for the country here because Andy Burnham is a hardcore socialist. Let's look at his cabinet members, of course, as well. They all are too. So I think what we have to do on the right is unite. The right has to be united. Now, we've got Reform UK did very well in the local elections. It surprised a lot of his critics. I know Nigel Farage. I worked with him in the Brexit Party. He's got a lot of panache. He's a great orator. And along comes Restore. And of course, there are big divisions between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe was a Reform MP when and the big falling out, Lowe and Nigel Farage, and those around Nigel. So there's a lot of bad blood there. And I think the danger is that unless there is unity, unless there is a meeting of minds, an understanding that we might not always agree on every point, but we focus and concentrate on the things that we can agree on. So, for example, I think all the people on the right would agree that we need to stop the mass illegal immigration. We need to stop the boats from coming in. That's a big one, and it's causing a lot of concern and worry within communities all across the United Kingdom. Well, it's going to take some degree of cooperation. And whilst Rupert Lowe and Nigel have sort of personal issues going back, and I'm not going to say who was right, who was wrong, the point is they exist. And the danger for the country is that unless we get cohesive, structure, party, mechanism in place, then the likelihood of Andy Burnham calling in general election is a very real danger. And of course, they put him into position, which is very interesting. He was, up until recently, the mayor of Manchester. Then they made way. They got a sitting member of parliament to step aside. There was the by-election. He won that. It was a very safe Labour stronghold seat, a red wall seat. And the next thing, he's in there now as Prime Minister. So he took over as leader, and then they put him in as Prime Minister. And they did that, Godfrey, because they knew that if they left Keir Starmer and his deeply unpopular policies and his very unpopular personal approval rating, that they would be in real trouble. So they've taken in a fresh face with somebody like Andy Burnham, who they think will stand a better chance to bring those votes in. But a lot of us understand that he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I say that quite deliberately because the Fabian Society plays a huge role and have done for the last 130 years in the United Kingdom. Every Labour Prime Minister has been a member of the Fabian Society, and their symbol is a wolf in sheep's clothing. So deception, intrigue, and that is something that I'm concerned about. So I think what we have to do, what I'm telling to a lot of people are in contact with me, not just in the United Kingdom, by the way. There's a lot of people, because we have a very large international audience as well. A lot of people have a lot of goodwill towards the United Kingdom and the British people. And they're saying, well, what is really going on? And how do we help you? And how do we encourage the right to unite? And I've been spending a lot of time, of course, in Europe as well, and making sure that what's going on there is about uniting people for sovereignty and national identity and fighting against this mass illegal immigration, for example. So I think, in answer to your question, if the right don't unite, either under a new leader or under a new banner or under some other mechanism, then the danger is we're going to see the socialists get back in or to remain in power. And of course, they will call a general election when they think the opposition is at their weakest. And before I hand back to you, I would say that we've got the Conservative Party. Conservatives in the United Kingdom are historically the most successful of all political parties. But once again, we've seen this phenomenon of the uniparty system coming into the focus, where people who wear the Conservative label are Conservative in name only. So we've got a big problem with globalism and those who've infiltrated the parliamentary system. They call the tune to other masters. Some of them are not even in the United Kingdom. And that's a big problem for the British people because we want leaders who put the Brits first. We want people who put the country first, improve the economy, sort out the tax mess, sort out the problems the farmers are facing, and of course, our national defence and national security. So the worrying thing is we've got the Conservatives, we've got Restore now with Rupert Lowe, and we've got Reform UK led by Nigel Farage. But the problem is, as you know well, Godfrey, the first past the post system is a difficult system to manage and to achieve success in. And if there's too many votes being split in too many different ways, then the danger is that Labour might get back in again. And I think that would be the death knell for the United Kingdom.
Thank you for that. It seems to me, and I'd be interested in your view on this, I don't know whether it's because I'm now knocking on a bit and getting sort of more cynical by the hour. It seems to me there's one or two things that simply haven't been accepted by anybody in the political sphere or the press, which we don't have a free press anymore, and that's self-evident, that the biggest threat to the country, of course, is mass immigration, and it is quite deliberate. It's policy of the last government, it's policy of this government. And you don't need to be particularly bright to see it. If you're inviting everybody in the world and his wife and putting them in 4-star hotels and giving them pocket money and 3 square meals a day, an advantageous medical system, this is quite deliberate. And I get annoyed when I hear about smash the gangs. There are no gangs. There are no gangs. This is a government policy, and they're bringing them in. The gangs consist of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, Royal Navy, French Navy, so on and so forth. This is what is actually happening. Now, my view is, and it might be cynical, and we have almost an entire civil service, most of the leaders of which are also members of the Fabian Society, who are not reporting to an elected minister, and the elected minister therefore cannot sack them. It doesn't matter at the moment, particularly, because it's a left-wing civil servant, it's a left-wing government. But those times will change, of course. And we have all these civil servants and a system which is stacked against any form of reform. And I say reform with a small r. And apart from, I have to say, Rupert Lowe, who I haven't met personally, but he does seem to be saying one thing, and that's radical. We have in this country an existential threat from this alien immigration en masse. And that is the problem that we have. And I get the impression that everybody's, maybe with the exception of Rupert, and I don't know, I'm not a member of Restore, nobody's really admitting what the existential problem is. And if we don't have an election for 3 years, which is, I think, when it's got to happen, we can't get out of this by our normal parliamentary democratic system. We also have a king who's head of a constitutional monarchy who has a lot more power than people imagine. Everybody poo-poos it, says, oh, the king can't do this, king can't do this, the king's just a figurehead. This is not true, as you well know, Jim. This is not true. He most certainly can. And if he were doing his job, he would simply look at the invasion landing on the south coast, which is now existential in the same way it was when Barbary pirates did this in the 15 and 1600s and carrying away people, ironically, away into slavery, which nobody's talking about these days, least of all the fake Archbishop of Canterbury. So I don't personally believe that we can get our way out of this with the current political system. I think we sort of need, I would argue, perhaps an Oliver Cromwell. We need somebody to come in and say, get thee gone, and take control for a year or two and then hand back when these things have been dealt with. I can't see us digging our way out of this. I mean, it's got to the stage now, and I was telling Mike Graham this morning. I was on the Mike Graham show, and I said, we have a small holding in East Yorkshire, and a sleepy bit of East Yorkshire. It's a very tiny village. It has big gates. It's about 10 acres. It's surrounded with fencing and so on and so forth. And it's a very small village. And our family money is in Switzerland. And we are simply taking ourselves off the table. We can't be seen. We won't be seen, so on and so forth. The money's been distributed amongst the family with an eye on IHT. We've made absolutely sure we don't earn more money in our business than puts us into a high rate tax bracket, so on and so forth. It seems to me that I'm not going to be alone in this. And of course, younger men and women are simply going. They're simply going. And these are the entrepreneurial seed corn of the nation. And they're going. And we're bringing people in. And Rishi Sunak believed all this, an ex-Goldman Sachs man from the Indian subcontinent himself, of course, who believed it would be cheap labor, this idea of cheap labor. People don't seem to understand that cheap labor is not required. It's informed, intellectual people that are wanting to be. There's no room for people with no skills, or no room for people who can't speak English and have no skills. So there's nothing that these people can do to get themselves off welfare. They will be in welfare, and that includes not just illegals, that includes people who are settling down to a life of welfare, and we might argue that what we need to do is get back to Beveridge, 1943. The Beveridge, which was an idea that welfare was a safety net, not a lifestyle choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to finish up on this point, sorry to rant on a little bit, you've then got to look at individuals in the smaller parties. It's going to be an unbelievably tough task, and you're going to need somebody with balls of steel to do this. You're going to need people with you've got to decimate the civil service, you've got to mobilize the Royal Navy, you've got to do all sorts of things. With the exception perhaps of Rupert, and as I say, I've not met him, I don't think that we have people who have got the balls to do this. They're trimmers. I think you and I will understand this is an old term, trimmer. But I think they're trimmers. And I think when push comes to shove, they'll prevaricate and they'll trim and they'll cut, they'll cut back on this and they'll cut back on that. And I think that's where we are at the moment. Tell me if you think there is real hope, from a parliamentary democratic perspective.
Well, absolutely, there is hope. But some things have to be done, first of all. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned, which was critically important to this whole discussion that we're having in the country right now. And that is that mass illegal immigration is deliberate. It is by design. It is government policy. Now, people say, well, why would a government encourage illegal activity? And you talk about the gangs, you talk about the gangs. Well, the biggest gang is the government. And I say that with an eye on the previous Conservative government as well, because when they were in power for 14 years, what did they do to stop it? Absolutely nothing. So there is a system in place. And a lot of people say, well, why is this happening? And there is an answer to that. The overwhelming majority of people know there's something deeply wrong when a government allows illegal activity on a massive scale that is causing crime rates to rise, attacks on women and children, not just sexual attacks, but murders to take place. Why does a government allow that? Because the first order of any government is the safety and security of its people. So why are they putting our British people at risk? Well, it's because they serve a bigger agenda, Godfrey. There is attacks on our national identity. It's done through the education system. It's done in schools. It's done, through the political process as well. So, for example, people that like to fly the Union flag or the Welsh flag or the Scottish flag as part of the, the different parts of the United Kingdom are attacked and labelled as far right or extremists or racists, when in actual fact they're not. So why are the attacks on national identity taking place? Well, it's because they want to do away with national identity. They don't want strong, independent countries. People say, well, why wouldn't they? Well, it's because the power elites, the very powerful people that you don't even wouldn't recognize if they walk past you in the street, they are the ones who want a one world global system. So they want global citizens. They don't want people identifying as French or German or British or Irish or Scottish. They want people to identify with a one world system that they control. Now, people say, well, that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Well, it's not a theory. It is reality. And there are a lot of global orders supported by the United Nations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the World Economic Forum, and many others who, although they compete with each other for power, have a unifying bond between them, and that is a one world new order that they control. So there's a lot of organization going into destabilizing our respective countries, whether that's the Kingdom or Ireland. It's arguably even at a worse critical state, especially in the southern Ireland communities, but it's happening in France and Germany and many other nations, not quite so much in Eastern Europe, where I've been spending a lot of time. I'll come back to that, why I'm spending so much time in Eastern Europe. But there is a deliberate policy. And these globalist organizations, we talked about the Fabian Society, they are heavily funded by the European Commission. Why would they be doing that? Well, because they're pushing that agenda, which they like. The European elites and the Commission in particular are causing a lot of concern with our European friends as well. So there's a deliberate process taking place. People need to understand this is not just by chance. And I think people are, in their masses, are waking up to the fact that this is not asylum seekers. It's not women and children fleeing war-torn zones. If it was, we would all have a degree of empathy with that. But these are young military-aged men who are being encouraged to come, put up in the best of accommodation with free healthcare that they've never contributed to in their tax and their national insurance contributions. They're being given free phones, cash handouts. And there is a two-tier policing system and a two-tier justice system now where migrants, young illegal migrant men, are committing the most heinous of crimes and being let go or released early into the community, while people who speak the truth are finding themselves getting knocks on the door by the constabulary, and some are being put in prison. I also want to come on to something else you talked, and that's King Charles. I met Queen Elizabeth, and I've met other members of the royal family personally as well. I had a lot of respect for her. She was a monarch that reigned for a long time. In my opinion, didn't put a... And that's a very different form of monarchy that we have under King Charles. Of course, he knows exactly what's going on. And you made a very interesting point. There's a lot more power than people realize. He's not just the figurehead. He has a way. Why would the king of our country not take these governments to task? Well, it's probably because he wants to be part of this new world system. And we can't ignore the fact that he has a long, long history with Klaus Schwab, who for a long time was holding sway within the World Economic Forum and still plays a big part in that. The other thing that you're quite correct on is that there are about 240,000 British people who have left the UK just within the last few years. 14,000 of them were high earners. So you're talking millionaire plus. 14,000 of them have moved out of the country and left. Some of them have actually, I've spoken to some of them personally and done some research for a few individuals who were looking to uproot and go and create a new life in another country. So there's a lot going on, and people like Mike Graham, he's a great guy. I haven't met Mike Graham, but he calls it for what he is. He calls it for what the system is. So there is hope. But there has to be a unity movement or a unifying, something that will bring the Restore members to the table, something that will bring Reform to the table, something that will bring the Conservatives to the table. But what we're looking for in this country is strong leadership, truthful leadership, people that will put Britain first and put an immediate stop to the carnage that's happening in our communities with this huge levels of mass illegal immigration. And we saw it in Ceuta in Spain just within the last few days, and we're still seeing it, by the way, is a reminder that the Schengen Agreement, as you'll know well, is all good and well within the European Union member states. But when they are gate crashing through the border checkpoints, they are then free to go wherever they want. So they are saying that they've deported them all up. That doesn't seem to be the case. Happening. They are saying it's being dealt with, but it's not happening. And then you get Ursula von der Leyen, the leader of the European Commission. Shocked she was to see all of this. I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors, Godfrey. She is presiding over a European Commission that has no interest in democratic principles and does not want strong national identities. She and her colleagues in the Commission are the biggest problem that Europe faces. And although that we are technically no longer part of the European Union, we still have the ECHR, we still have all of these connections. And of course, there is big moves to integrate the British military, the intelligence apparatus and policing under European control. So there's a lot going on. Britain does face existential threats. It's not just Rupert Lowe that said it. Even President Trump, J.D. Vance, the Vice President, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, they've all said it. Europe faces an existential threat, and so does the United Kingdom. If we don't find a leader who will put British interests first and foremost, dead centre on the table, and put an immediate halt to all of this, then goodness knows where we're going to be by the time the next general election happens, which will probably be 2029. But I suspect there may be an early snap election called by Labour, called by Andy Burnham, who is currently the Prime Minister, when he thinks he can, the deception is there, and where he thinks people think he's actually one of the good guys. Socialists are not good guys. They're highly dangerous, and they are akin to communism. So Pedro Sanchez in Spain, he is an ardent socialist, of course, as well, borderline communist, and he and those like him in other European nations are all playing this game. It's a dangerous game. But I think whether there would be another Oliver Cromwell moment, well, I don't know if that would happen. But certainly the powers that be will not allow an election to take place if they think they're going to lose power. We saw this happening in Romania, and I spent a lot of time with George Simeon, who was the presidential candidate there. I was flown in, and prior to the election, I was there in the parliament during the election itself, and I've been back and forth to Eastern Europe, Moldova, Bulgaria, and Romania, of course, many, many times. And there was big accusations of election interference in Romania, France, Germany, by the European Commission. And I think there was a lot of suspected activity by the French intelligence service through social media and other means to stop the presidential candidate George Simeon from rising to power there. So if they can do that, you've got people like Thierry Breton saying, well, we did it there. If we have to do it in Germany, we will do it in Germany. Germany's another big case in point, but the AfD are rising rapidly. Alice Weidel will probably be the next chancellor, but we have to be keeping a very close eye. And the Judicial Committee report from the United States highlighted the election interference that was going on and questioned it, and they're keeping a pretty close eye on it. So can we legitimately have a change of government? Maybe, but the dirty tricks by the EU Commission and those globalists who have infested our respective parliaments will have another view on that. So it's going to take an overwhelming majority of the country, like what happened in Brexit with the Brexit Party, which I was a part of, to blow away any kind of dirty tricks that might be there. If the country really got behind a new leader or an existing leader that reaches out and unifies the country, then we might stand a chance. So there is still hope that that could be done.
Thank you very much for that assessment. And I think we'll finish there because that was quite a positive note, or certainly a reasonably hopeful note. And I always think if I can finish on that, that's good. My wife says I get everybody running out of the room committing suicide when I speak. which is not without, that view is not without merit. So we'll finish it then. I'm very grateful for your input because I know you've been battling for many years yourself to try and get ourselves sorted out in this. And I'm an old man now, but I looked at it all at the past, and I do hope we can. The country has got through very dark days in the past, as you well know, as a fellow historian, very dark days. But the only thing that is different from that, you can get out of this, you can fight the enemy foeman, you can get out of an economic crisis, but it's the enemy within. It's the problem. It's the enemy within. And I'm sorry to say, perhaps a police force which is simply nothing like the P-like concept which it used to be. So there we are. Anyway, I'll finish it before I go negative again. Thank you again. By the way, for those who want to watch Jim's excellent show, there's a tagline here. We'll put that on so you can get it. You can follow Jim, and believe me, it's well worth following.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Godfrey. Always a pleasure to be on with you. Keep up the great work that you're doing. You're one of the sharpest geopolitical minds that I know. So thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Great pleasure. Thank you. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.